Mary Chapin Carpenter has won 5 Grammy Awards, and actually one of the only artists who ever won 4 consecutive awards, and she's sold millions of records. 3 years ago, she was lying on an emergency room gurney, terrified by a sharp pain in her chest that was so bad that she had to cut short a tour that she was on to return home to her farm in Charlottesville, Virginia. Staring at the ceiling and struggling for breath, she felt sudden relief from a friendly face. She wrote, "I remember this doctor leaned over me, and he said in the most gentle and comforting way, 'We found it. It's a pulmonary embolism. We know what it is,' she said. An embolism had shattered in my lungs." Well, that slowed her down for a while. And she made this statement. She said, "When you don't do what you normally do, you ask, 'Who am I?' When I'm not getting on a bus, going on tour, or connecting to the world through music, I find myself asking, 'How do I connect to other people, to the world, to life? Who am I now?'" Well, 6 months after the embolism was treated, she began writing songs again, and for the next 2.5 years, she slowly pieced together her new 12-song album that she has entitled "The Age of Miracles." During those years of forced solitude, she tells us that she learned a great deal about herself, about what her needs are, what she really needs to be involved with in life. And one of her songs on that album is entitled, "I Have a Need for Solitude." And some of the lyrics go, "I'll never be safe in crowded rooms. I like the sound of silence coming on. I come around when all the rest have gone." In that first reading this weekend, Elijah has fled to the wilderness out of great fear, and he's complaining to the Lord. If you read the whole passage, he's frazzled. He's overworked and underpaid. His soul and his brain are overwhelmed. He feels underappreciated and undervalued. But he looks for God in the same experiences that caused his breakdown. He looks for God in the wind and the earthquake and the fire. And where does he find God? He finds God in the sound of sheer silence. Now, our church has a long history of contemplative practice, and that seems to suggest that there is some knowledge of God that can only come in stillness. Some knowledge of God that can only come in silence, long and large and intentional, enough to open a sacred space for the Holy One to enter. This is what Mary Chapin Carpenter discovered during her convalescence, her deep need for silence and solitude. It's interesting that the Rolling Stone magazine once interviewed Mick Jagger, head of the Rolling Stones, about his state of spirituality. And he remarked that, "Of course I have a spiritual side. Everyone has one. It's whether they're going to lock it up or not." He went on to say, "Our lives are so busy that we never get any time to be first reflective and then afterward to let some sort of spiritual light into our lives." I know I'm aging myself, but it takes me back to memories of Simon and Garfunkel in that great sound, "Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to be with you again in the sounds of silence." Our lives are so busy, and we so often make the mistake that Elijah made, that God is found in the fire and the wind and the earthquake, which today really is symbolic of the fast-paced lives that we lead. But the chaotic pace of our lives only leads to the same breakdown that Elijah experienced, and we find ourselves searching for God in all the wrong places. Back in March of 2009, there's a Dutch artist by the name of Johan van der Dongen. He decided that God needed a telephone number. So he got him one, a cell phone number to be exact. He wanted to show the world that God was available anywhere and anytime. And he remarked in earlier times you would go to a church to say a prayer, but he said now here's an opportunity to just make a phone call and say your prayer in a modern way. Now, it seems that a lot of people appreciated this opportunity that the Dutch artist afforded them, this divine hotline. Within 1 week, 1,000 people had left God a message. On the one hand, it's nice to know that there are 1,000 people who wanted to connect with God. On the other hand, you had to ask yourself how these people felt when the connection was made. You see, when a person called the number that this artist had set up for God, this is what they heard on the other side of the line. This is the voice of God. I am not able to speak to you at the moment, but please leave a message. That doesn't exactly convey the idea of a God who is available anywhere and anytime. To make matters worse, the artist kept the line open for only 6 months. When you reflect on this, Dong really only managed to connect people to an altogether disconnected God. Once again, looking for God in all the wrong places. We do live in an age of alienation, and researchers constantly tell us that what is really blocking our joy in relationships, what is really blocking our creativity, what is really blocking our peace of mind is our lack of solitude. That we are so seldom still and alone with ourselves to allow God to penetrate our lives. And science has determined that noise is pathogenic, that it can cause disease in the human body, and not just in the inner ear that we once believed. William Stewart, former Surgeon General for the U.S. Public Health Service, once stated that the noises of the 20th century living are a major contributory factor in the deaths that occur daily from cardiovascular problems. He went on to say, noise must be considered a hazard to the health of people everywhere. So as we come together this weekend and reflect upon the experience of Elijah, and in the gospel, we see Jesus heading off into the desert all by himself to pray in solitude. We are called to realize that that quiet wind is all around us, in which God is incessantly whispering into our ears and into our psyches. Yet we so seldom hear him because of the noise and the hurry and the distractions of our lives. Thomas Merton once said, "Not all people are called to be hermits, but all need enough silence and solitude in their lives to enable the deep inner voice of their own true self to be heard at least occasionally. In our rapid-fire world, meaningful time alone is one of the most needed tonics." So here we are in the wonderful days of summer, and we are just beginning this August. So perhaps we can call to mind the chaotic busyness of our own lives and try to slow down, try to move away from the wind, the fire, and the earthquakes of our lives, to listen to the sheer sound of silence and find God in ways that we have never found him before. On the bulletin, I've put a little prayer for all of us this weekend, a listener's prayer. God, grant me to be silent before you, that I may hear you, at rest in you, that you may work in me, open to you, that you may enter, empty before you, that you may fill me. Let me be still and know that you are my God.